Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Noir Intellect. I'm your host, Victor Blackwood. If you enjoy mysteries, hidden clues, and uncovering the truth, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Leave it in the comments below. Now, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. The mystery begins now. Chapter 1. The man in the chair, the first man who ever sat in Nero Wolfe's chair without permission, entered the brownstone at 11 minutes past 4 on a wet Thursday afternoon and behaved as if he had come to collect it. I opened the door because Fritz was in the kitchen arguing with a sauce, and Wolfe was upstairs among the orchids, where interruption was considered a lower form of violence. The visitor stood on the stoop bareheaded, though rain had darkened his hair and shoulders. He was perhaps 35, lean, pale, and dressed in a grey suit that had once been expensive. "Mr. Wolfe," he said. "He exists. I must see him. Most people who say that are mistaken." He looked past me into the hall. "My name is Elias Trent. That improves the introduction, but not the appointment. I have no appointment." I had guessed. He stepped forward. I moved enough to block the doorway. "Try again, Mr. Trent. This time include a reason." His eyes met mine. They were steady, but the rest of him was not. His right hand trembled near his coat pocket. "The chair," he said. "What chair?" "Nero Wolfe's chair." That was not the answer I expected. I let him enter because curiosity has opened more doors than courtesy ever did. He crossed the front hall without waiting for his coat to be taken and walked directly toward the office. "Hold it," I said. He did not. I caught his arm before he reached the threshold. "You know the house. I know where the chair is." "That is not the same thing." He pulled free with surprising strength and entered the office. Wolfe's chair stood behind his desk, broad brown and built to carry more weight than most furniture encounters in a lifetime. It had been made to his measurements, reinforced beneath the seat, and adjusted through years of use until Wolfe regarded it less as furniture than territory. Elias Trent crossed the room and sat in it. I admit I stopped. He did not drop into it carelessly. He lowered himself with both hands on the arms, settled his shoulders against the back, and tested the balance by shifting slightly to the left. Then he closed his eyes. I went around the desk. "Get up." He opened them. "It still leans half an inch toward the window. You have 3 seconds. The brass brace beneath the left arm has loosened." I stopped again. That brace was hidden beneath the upholstery and wooden frame. I knew of it because Wolfe had once ordered a repairman out of the house for suggesting it could be replaced with steel. Fritz knew because Fritz knew everything in the brownstone. Theodore might have known. No stranger should have. Trent ran one finger along the underside of the armrest. "The third screw is not original," he said. "It was replaced after the split near the rear joint." "Who told you?" "My grandfather." The elevator motor sounded in the hall. That was bad timing for Trent and excellent timing for me. Wolfe entered the office wearing a dark brown suit, a pale yellow shirt, and a face prepared to object to the weather. He took 2 steps, saw the man in his chair, and stopped. Wolfe rarely freezes. He prefers to make the world do it. His eyes moved from Trent's face to the hands resting on the chair arms. His lips pressed forward. "Archie." "Yes, remove him." Trent stood before I could touch him. "My apologies, Mr. Wolfe." "You have none." I had to know whether it was the same chair. Wolfe remained near the door. "You entered my house without appointment, ignored Mr. Goodwin, and occupied my chair. No information you possess can improve your conduct. The chair belonged to my grandfather." Wolfe's brows rose slightly. "No, he built it. No, Samuel Trent, cabinet maker. He made it 30 years ago for Judge Alton Vane." Wolfe's expression changed by a degree. With Wolfe, a degree can be an event. I moved behind my desk and opened a notebook. Trent saw me do it, but continued. "My grandfather designed the frame, the reinforced seat, and the hidden brace beneath the left arm. The chair was built for Judge Vane after an injury made ordinary chairs painful." Wolfe walked slowly toward his desk, but did not approach the chair. "You assert that the chair was made for another man." "Yes, it was purchased for me from an estate dealer 22 years ago. After Judge Vane died, his name was not mentioned. It would not have been." "Why?" Trent looked toward the office door. "Because the chair contained something." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. What? I don't know. That answer is offensive. It is true. Wolfe remained standing. He would not sit in the red leather chair merely because a visitor had contaminated his own. I said, "You crossed half of New York in the rain to tell us a chair contains something, but you don't know what." "My grandfather knew. He is available. He died last week. How convenient for the mystery." Trent ignored me. "Before he died, he told me Judge Vane had ordered him to build a hidden compartment into the frame, not beneath the seat, inside the left side, behind the brass brace." Wolfe looked at the chair. "Why conceal a compartment behind a structural support? So no one could open it without partly dismantling the frame. And what was placed inside?" "My grandfather was never told. Judge Vane sealed it himself." "Then how do you know it remains there?" "I don't." Wolfe made a low sound. Trent reached into his coat. I had my gun halfway out before his hand emerged. He was holding a small brass key. He placed it on Wolfe's desk. It was old, narrow, and darkened at the teeth. "My grandfather gave me that 3 days before he died," he said. It opened the inner panel. Wolfe glanced at it, but did not touch it. "Why wait until now?" "I did not know who owned the chair. My grandfather remembered only that it had been sold after Judge Vane's estate was broken up. I searched old dealer records. This morning I found the name of the buyer." "Mine? Nero Wolfe," I said. "Dealer records from 22 years ago are not usually sitting beside the morning paper. They were in the files of Bramwell Antiques. Still in business? No. Its records were purchased by a private collector. Name? Harold Quill." That name meant nothing to me, but Wolfe's eyes shifted. "You know him?" I asked. "No." Trent looked again toward the hall. "They know I found the record." "Who?" "The men who have been watching me." "How many?" "2 that I have seen. Names? I don't know." "Description?" "One is heavy, around 50, with grey hair. The other is younger and wears a black overcoat." "That narrows New York to several 100,000. Trent gripped the edge of Wolfe's desk. His knuckles had turned white. Wolfe noticed. "You are ill." "No." "You are sweating in a cool room." "I ran from a cab." "You are breathing irregularly." Trent swallowed. "I had to reach the chair first." "Before whom?" He looked directly at Wolfe. "Powerful men are coming for it." Wolfe's lips tightened. Powerful is a word used by frightened men when they lack names. "They will kill for what is hidden inside." "You do not know what is hidden. My grandfather did." "You said he was never told." "Learned later." "That changed the room," Wolfe said. "How?" Trent opened his mouth, but no words came. His fingers slipped from the desk. I moved fast enough to catch one shoulder, but not fast enough to hold his full weight. His knees folded, and he struck the carpet beside Wolfe's chair. The brass key spun once on the desk and stopped. I knelt beside him. His eyes were open but unfocused. His breathing came in short, dry gasps. "Fritz," I shouted. Wolfe said, his pulse. I found it at the neck, rapid and weak. Trent's right hand clutched his coat near the chest. I loosened his collar. A faint, bitter smell reached me. Not whiskey, not medicine I recognized. Fritz entered at a run, carrying a towel, as if emergencies were likely to involve spills. "Telephone," I said. "Dr. Vollmer. Tell him hurry." Fritz went. Trent's lips moved. I bent closer. "The key," he whispered. "It is here. Do not open it. That is an odd use for a key." His hand caught my sleeve. "They must not know." "Who?" "The judge knew." "What did he know?" Trent's eyes moved toward the chair. "The names." "What names?" He tried to answer. Only breath came. Then his body went still. I checked the pulse again. It was there, but barely. Wolfe had not moved from behind the visitor's chair. His face had become unreadable, which usually meant anger had been forced to make room for thought. I searched Trent's pockets, wallet, handkerchief, train ticket from White Plains, $3.80. A folded newspaper clipping about the death of retired cabinet maker Samuel Trent. No weapon. In the inside pocket I found a small envelope addressed to Elias Trent in a shaky hand. The flap had been torn open. Inside was a single sheet. I read it aloud. "Elias, the chair made for Judge Vane must never be opened in the presence of anyone connected to the Belmont inquiry. The key fits beneath the left brace. Trust no officer, lawyer, or member of the Vane family. Find the present owner before they find you." There was no signature, Wolfe said. "The handwriting, probably the grandfather's. The Belmont inquiry. Never heard of it. Nor have I. That was rare enough to deserve attention." The doorbell rang. I looked at Wolfe. He looked toward the hall. It rang again, twice, hard. Fritz called from the kitchen. "Dr. Vollmer is coming." The bell sounded a third time. I stood and drew my gun. "Expecting powerful men?" I asked. Wolfe ignored that. "Archie, the door." I went to the front hall but did not open it once. Through the narrow side glass I saw two men on the stoop. One was heavy, about 50, with grey hair. The other wore a black overcoat. I returned to the office. "His friends have arrived." Trent lay unconscious on the rug. The old letter was in my hand. The small brass key remained on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe looked at the chair, then at me. "Admit them. You are feeling social?" "No." "Then why?" "Because they came for my property. That did it." I went back to the door and opened it 6 inches with the chain on. The heavy man spoke first. "We are looking for Elias Trent." "You have found him?" "Enter." "Then, your eyesight works." The younger man stepped forward. "This is official business." He reached inside his coat and showed me a leather case too quickly to read. I said, "Hold it still." He closed it. "That is enough." "It is enough to make me suspicious." The heavy man's voice hardened. "Trent stole an item belonging to a private client. We have authority to recover it." "What item?" "A key." Behind me, Wolfe called from the office. "Archie," I answered without turning. "Yes?" "Close the door." The heavy man put one hand against it. I let the chain catch and pressed forward. He said, "You do not understand who is involved." That sentence usually means the speaker doesn't either. His face darkened. "The chair inside this house is stolen property." "Now you are insulting the furniture," the younger man said. "Tell Wolfe that Judge Vane's heirs will take legal action before morning. Tell them to bring strong paper." I pushed the door shut. The heavy man resisted for half a second, then released it. I locked it. When I returned to the office, Wolfe had moved to the red leather chair. He sat stiffly, as if the chair had personally failed him. His own chair stood empty. Trent remained on the floor, breathing weakly. Wolfe's gaze rested on the brass key. "Those men knew of it," I said. "Yes. They also claim the chair belongs to the Vane family." "Yes." "Do we open the compartment?" "No." "That is unexpected. It is inevitable." "Why?" "Because Mr. Trent warned us not to open it in the presence of anyone connected to the Belmont inquiry." "No one here is connected." "We do not know that." I looked at him. "You suspect me." "I suspect ignorance. It is always present." The bell rang again, followed by a heavy blow against the outer door. Wolfe's expression changed. His chair had been occupied, claimed, threatened, and possibly used to conceal evidence for 30 years. That was enough injury for one afternoon. He looked at me. "Archie, telephone Inspector Kramer. The letter says trust no officer, Mr. Trent is unconscious and therefore temporarily relieved of command. And the men outside, keep them there. How? Use the door." The bell sounded once more. Then a car stopped at the curb. Dr. Vollmer, I hoped. Or more powerful men. I picked up the telephone while Wolfe stared at the chair that had ruled his office for 22 years. Somewhere inside its wooden frame, behind a hidden brass brace, lay a secret left by a dead judge and protected by a frightened cabinet maker. Elias Trent had reached it first. He had also reached our floor unconscious. Before the day ended, I had a feeling Wolfe would forgive neither event. Chapter 2. The makers, Mark, Fritz and I, moved Elias Trent to the front room because Wolfe refused to permit an unconscious stranger to remain beside his chair. That was how he phrased it. He did not say the rug was in danger, or that Dr. Vollmer needed better light, or that the office had become crowded. He said, "Remove him from the vicinity of the chair," and his tone made it clear which of the two required protection. Elias was breathing more steadily by then. Fritz took his shoulders, I took his legs, and together we carried him through the hall. He weighed less than he looked. His grey suit hung loosely on him, and the bitter smell near his collar had grown stronger. Dr. Vollmer arrived while we were lowering Elias onto the front room sofa. He put down his bag, removed his coat, and began asking questions with the efficient irritation of a doctor called away from dinner. "How long was he unconscious?" 6 minutes, I said. "What happened before he collapsed?" "He sat in Wolfe's chair." Vollmer looked at me. "That is not a medical event." "In this house it is." He was sweating, breathing badly, and said powerful men were coming for the furniture. Vollmer bent over Elias. Did he eat or drink anything here? No. Any injury? None visible. He checked the pupils, pulse, heart, and breathing. Then he opened Elias's mouth and sniffed. Some kind of sedative, he said, possibly mixed with a stimulant. That sounds like an argument in a bottle. It could produce panic, rapid pulse, collapse, and confusion. Poison? Not necessarily. I need a blood sample. Will he live? Probably. From the office, Wolfe called. Dr. Vollmer straightened. He is your patient. He is your medical problem. I require information. Vollmer gave me a look, but he went to the office. I stayed with Elias until Fritz returned with blankets and a basin. The two men outside had stopped ringing the bell. That did not mean they had gone. It meant they had learned. The bell was not persuasive. When I entered the office, Wolfe was in the red leather chair, which did not suit him. It was too narrow, too low, and too ordinary. He looked like a king forced to conduct business from a railway bench. His own chair stood behind the desk, empty. Vollmer said, "He was probably drugged several hours ago. The effect may wear off soon, but he should be watched. Can he answer questions? Not yet. When? Possibly within an hour." Wolfe frowned. Possibly is a word doctors use to protect invoices, and certainty is a word patients demand before ignoring advice. They had known each other too long for either to win. Vollmer took blood from Elias, left instructions with Fritz, and departed through the rear entrance. After I confirmed, the two men were still in a car across the street. I returned to office. Wolfe had not moved. "Inspect the chair," he said. "You told Trent not to open it, mister. Trent is unconscious." He also said powerful men were coming. They have come. "And you want to reward them?" "I want facts before they acquire documents." I went around the desk. The chair was broad, heavy, and covered in dark brown leather, polished by 22 years of Wolfe. Beneath the left armrest was the brass brace Elias had named. I had seen it during an earlier repair, but never closely. I knelt. The brace curved from the underside of the arm toward the seat frame. 3 screws held it in place. The rear screw was newer than the others, just as Elias had said. "Flashlight," I told Wolfe. He looked at me. "I got it myself." The leather beneath the arm had been fixed with brass upholstery tacks. Several showed old wear. 3 near the brace looked slightly different. Their heads were flatter, and one carried a fresh scratch. I removed them carefully. The leather lifted enough to expose the wooden frame. Stamped into the wood was a small mark, Est. Trent Cabin Mapka 1935. "There it is," said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Authentic. It has been there longer than I have. An insufficient standard. The wood has darkened around the stamp. It was made before the upholstery went on." "Continue." I ran my fingers along the exposed frame. The wood was oak, thick and smooth, except for a narrow groove running lengthwise behind the brass brace. It was too straight to be damaged. I measured it with the edge of my knife. 6 inches long, 1/8 of an inch wide. "This groove was cut later," I said. "How do you know? The finish does not match. The main frame was sanded and sealed. The groove has rough edges, and the stain is lighter." Wolfe regarded the chair as if it had violated a contract. "Purpose? Guide track, perhaps? Something slides inside. The key? Maybe." I examined the brace. Near the rear joint, hidden by leather, was a tiny keyhole no larger than a match head. I took the brass key from Wolfe's desk. He said, "Do not turn it." I was only comparing. The key fit. That was enough. I withdrew it. Wolfe's lips moved slightly. "The compartment exists." "Yes." "Do not open it." "Now you are protecting Trent's warning." "I am protecting the evidence from haste." I replaced the leather loosely but left the tacks out. The front doorbell rang. Once. Then, twice. I went to the hall and looked through the side glass. The grey-haired man had returned. Beside him stood a different companion, a tall woman in a dark coat, carrying a leather portfolio. I opened the door with the chain on. The man said, "We have legal documents. Congratulations. My Leonard Shaw. This is Miss Clara Voss, counsel for the Hale estate." The woman held up the portfolio. "We require immediate access to Mr. Wolfe. He requires appointments. This concerns stolen property currently inside the house. Furniture gets restless in damp weather." She did not smile. The chair in Mr. Wolfe's office was removed unlawfully from the estate of Judge Warren Hale 30 years ago. That was a new judge. Elias had named Judge Alton Vane. The letter named the Belmont Inquiry. Now Clara Voss offered Warren Hale. I said, "Your story has acquired another owner. It is not a story." Then why did Elias Trent say the chair was made for Judge Vane? Shaw and Voss exchanged a glance. Small, quick, and useful. Voss said, "Mr. Trent is confused. He knew the hidden brace. He is the grandson of the maker. That proves nothing about ownership." "You know about the brace?" She hesitated. Shaw informed me. I looked at Shaw. He had no reaction at all. That took practice. "Wait here," I said. "We will not wait outside. You will, unless you can become thinner than the chain." I closed the door and returned to the office. Wolfe had heard enough through the hall. "Judge Warren Hale," he said. "Yes, not Judge Alton Vane. Apparently the chair has a social history. Admit them." I brought them in. Shaw removed his hat. Voss kept the portfolio under one arm. She was perhaps 40, sharp-featured, composed, and dressed in black without looking theatrical. Shaw was heavier, grey-haired, and built like a man who had spent years entering rooms where people preferred him absent. They stopped when they saw Wolfe in the red chair. Voss looked at the larger chair behind the desk. "That is the property," Wolfe said. "Sit." They did. Shaw chose the yellow chair. Voss sat near my desk and opened the portfolio. She produced 3 documents. The first was an affidavit signed by a trustee of the Warren Hale estate. The second was a copy of an inventory dated 30 years earlier. The third was a court petition seeking immediate recovery of one custom-built reinforced chair described in great detail. I read them. The inventory listed 1 oversized oak and leather chair, custom construction, maker Samuel Trent. The dimensions matched Wolfe's chair. The petition claimed it had been removed from Judge Hale's residence after his death and sold without authority by an estate employee. Wolfe said, "Hale died 30 years ago?" 31. Judge Alton Vane? Her eyes changed slightly. "What of him? The chair was allegedly made for him." "No, Mr. Trent says otherwise. Mr. Trent has been making false ownership claims for weeks." "Why?" "To extort money from the Hale heirs." Shaw spoke for the first time since sitting. He approached 2 family members and demanded $50,000 for information about the chair. I said, "Did he say what was inside it?" Shaw looked at me. "No." That pause was nearly an answer. Voss placed one document closer to Wolfe. "The court will issue an order tomorrow morning. We are asking that you surrender the chair voluntarily tonight." "No," Wolfe said. She blinked. "You have not examined the evidence." "I've examined your demand. The chair is stolen property. That assertion is disputed by a man who entered your house under false pretenses. Mr. Trent correctly described concealed construction unknown to you until Mr. Goodwin mentioned it." Voss's face remained calm, but Shaw's head turned a fraction toward her. That was another useful movement. "How did Mr. Shaw learn of the brass brace?" Voss answered. "From Samuel Trent's workshop records." "They are not with us." "Then you possess documents sufficient to demand my chair, but not sufficient to explain its construction. The matter is urgent. So is dinner." Shaw leaned forward. "Mr. Wolfe, you do not understand the people involved." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "That sentence has already been delivered at my door. Repetition does not improve it. The Hale family includes men of considerable influence. Influence is another word used when fact has become inconvenient." Voss closed the portfolio. "We will return with the court order. You may return with a brass band. The chair will remain." She stood. Shaw did not. He looked at the chair. "Has Trent opened it?" I said. "Opened what?" "The frame." Voss turned sharply toward him. "Too late." Wolfe's voice became soft. "You know of the compartment?" Shaw stood. "I know only what I was told." "By whom?" "Samuel Trent. When years ago." "You knew him?" "Yes." "In what capacity?" Shaw looked at Voss. She said, "We are not here to answer questions." Wolfe said, "Then you are finished." They went to the door. Before leaving, Voss faced me. "If anything inside that chair is removed, altered, or destroyed, Mr. Wolfe will be personally liable. Write that down. We collect threats." She and Shaw left. I watched from the window until their car moved away. When I returned to the front room, Elias was awake. His eyes were open, and Fritz was helping him drink water. Dr. Vollmer's blanket covered him from chest to feet. I sat beside the sofa. "You have attracted lawyers." Elias stared at me. "Who?" "Clara Voss and Leonard Shaw. They say the chair belonged to Judge Warren Hale." His face tightened. Hale, you told us Judge Alton Vane. My grandfather built it for Vane. Hale acquired it later. How? I don't know. That phrase is getting crowded. He tried to sit higher. Fritz supported him. Judge Vane died suddenly. His estate was handled privately. The chair disappeared. Years later, my grandfather saw it in Warren Hale's library. Why was that important? Because of the compartment. What was inside? Elias closed his eyes briefly. My grandfather never opened it. Not then. But later, he nodded. He was repairing the chair at Hale's house. One night he heard voices in the library. Hale was meeting 3 men. Names? He recognized only one. Who? Elias swallowed. District Attorney Calvin Belmont. That gave the inquiry a name. What did they discuss? Judge. A payment. A man sent to prison for a murder he did not commit. Fritz and I exchanged a glance. Elias continued. My grandfather heard Hale say the evidence had been hidden where no one would search until every man in the room was dead. In the chair? Yes. How did your grandfather know? After the meeting, Hale ordered him to move the chair into a locked study. My grandfather found the panel open. Inside were photographs, payment records, and a list of names. Did he take them? No. He was frightened. Then why hide evidence inside the frame? He did not hide the original evidence. Elias's voice had weakened. I leaned closer. What did he hide? A copy, that was the groove. Where did he get it? He returned to Hale's house 2 days later. He copied the list and 1 payment record. Then he placed them deeper inside the frame, behind the original compartment. Why? So Hale could open the first compartment, remove the evidence, and believe the chair was empty. The narrow groove did not belong to the original design, because Samuel Trent had added a second concealment. What happened to the original papers? Hale removed them. My grandfather never saw them again, and the copy stayed in the chair. Yes. Why wait 30 years? He was afraid. Belmont became powerful. The others did too. My grandfather believed they watched him. Are they alive? Some heirs are, some partners. The names still matter. What murder? Elias looked toward the office. The Hawthorne case. I had heard of it. A businessman named Peter Hawthorne had been convicted of killing his partner 3 decades earlier. He died in prison, insisting he was innocent. The case had made careers for prosecutors, judges, and police officials. Who was the real killer? I asked. My grandfather did not know. The list showed who paid to suppress evidence. Was Warren Hale one of them? Yes. And Judge Vane? Elias hesitated. Vane discovered the payment. That is why he died. I stood. Stay here. I returned to the office. Wolfe had not moved. He looked uncomfortable in the red leather chair and enraged by the necessity of remaining there. I gave him Elias's account. He listened with his eyes closed. When I finished, he said, 2 compartments. Apparently, the original behind the brace, and a second one cut deeper into the frame. The groove. Yes, the key opens the obvious panel. Probably, and the copied evidence may be beyond it. Yes. Wolfe opened his eyes and looked at his chair. Mr. Shaw knew of the first compartment. He asked whether Trent had opened the frame, but he may not know of the second. That would explain the urgency. They want the chair before Elias opens what his grandfather hid. Wolfe's fingers pressed against the red chair's arms. Archie, yes? Move Mr. Trent upstairs under Fritz's supervision. Then, telephone Inspector Kramer. The letter said, trust no officer. The letter was written by a frightened cabinetmaker. I will select my own distrust. And the chair? Wolfe stared at it. No one touches it tonight, not even you. His expression became dangerous. That, sir, is the difficulty. The chair stood behind his desk, broad and silent, carrying 30 years of hidden guilt beneath the leather. 2 lawyers claimed it. A dying cabinetmaker had marked it. A poisoned visitor had reached it. And Nero Wolfe, deprived of his proper throne, was becoming personally interested. Chapter 3. The panel beneath the arm. At 9:10 the next morning, Nero Wolfe surrendered his chair to surgery. He did not enjoy it. The chair stood in the center of the office on a square of canvas Fritz had spread over the rug. Wolfe occupied the red leather chair beside his desk, which was built for an ordinary man, and therefore forced him to sit with the expression of a duke waiting in a dentist's office. Elias Trent remained upstairs under Fritz's supervision. Dr. Vollmer had returned at 7, examined him, and announced that the drug in his blood was probably a compound used to produce confusion and temporary collapse. He could not yet say when or how it had been administered. Inspector Kramer had arrived at 8:40, looked at the displaced chair, and asked whether Wolfe had finally been evicted from it. Wolfe had told him to sit down. Kramer now stood near my desk with his hands in his coat pockets. He had read Samuel Trent's letter, heard Elias's account of the meeting at Judge Warren Hale's house, and reacted to the names Belmont and Hawthorne by becoming unusually quiet. The Hawthorne case was 31 years ago, he said. Peter Hawthorne was convicted of killing his business partner, Robert Lane. The evidence was solid. Solid, Wolfe said, is a word policemen use when the accused has exhausted his appeals. Kramer ignored that. Calvin Belmont prosecuted. Warren Hale was the trial judge. Hawthorne died in prison 12 years later. Still claiming innocence, I asked. Yes. Anyone believe him? His wife, his brother, a few reporters who needed copy. Wolfe looked at the chair. And Samuel Trent allegedly discovered evidence that the prosecution was corrupted. Allegedly, Mr. Trent was drugged. 2 representatives of the Hale estate demanded the chair within hours. Their conduct improves his credibility. Kramer's jaw shifted. It also gives half a dozen people motive to lie. Then let us increase the number. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, open it. I held up the brass key. You told me last night no one was touching it. Last night is over. Your feelings have matured, my patience has not. I knelt beside the left armrest. The leather had already been loosened around the hidden brass brace. Beneath it, Samuel Trent's maker's mark darkened the oak. The narrow groove ran behind the brace, and the tiny keyhole waited near the rear joint. I inserted the key. It turned halfway and stopped. Kramer leaned closer. Force it? Wolfe glared at him. I said, this chair has survived 3 decades, and Wolfe, it deserves finesse. I pressed the brace inward while turning the key again. There was a soft click. The brass support shifted away from the frame by 1/4 of an inch. Behind it, a narrow wooden panel slid toward the rear along the groove I had found the night before. The movement was smooth despite its age. Samuel Trent had known his trade. A dark compartment appeared inside the arm. It was 6 inches deep and barely 2 inches wide. I aimed the flashlight into it. 3 objects lay inside. The first was a photograph wrapped in thin oilcloth. The second was a folded railway receipt. The third was a narrow strip of paper tied with black thread. Kramer said, "Don't touch anything." I looked at him. "You have become cautious overnight. Fingerprints. On paper that has been inside wood for 30 years. People have been convicted on less. That is not reassuring." I used tweezers to remove the photograph and placed it on Wolfe's desk. It showed 4 men standing outside a large stone house. The picture had faded, but the faces were clear. One was Judge Warren Hale, younger and thinner than the portrait I had seen in newspaper archives. The second was a broad man, with a square beard and heavy eyebrows. Kramer recognized him. Martin Crowe. Industrialist, I asked. Steel, rail freight, construction, dead 8 years. The third man had a narrow head and silver hair. Kramer's mouth tightened. Thomas Vale. Senator Thomas Vale, former senator now. He retired 5 years ago. The fourth man stood partly in shadow near the doorway. He wore a police uniform. Kramer bent over the photograph. "That is Edwin Shaw." "Commissioner Shaw?" "He was a captain, then. He became police commissioner 20 years later." I looked at him. "Related to Leonard Shaw, the man who came here with Clara Voss." "Not that I know," Wolfe said. "Learn." Kramer gave him a look, but took out a notebook. The railway receipt was dated 3 days after Peter Hawthorne's arrest. It recorded the shipment of 1 locked oak chest from Grand Central Terminal to a private siding owned by Crow Steel outside Albany. The sender was listed as W. Hale. The contents were described as legal records. The receipt bore a handwritten notation, "Deliver to MS Arrives." "E.S.," I said. "Edwin Shaw?" "Possibly," Wolfe said. Kramer examined the receipt. "Or anyone with those initials. Your profession has made you cautious too late," Wolfe said. I untied the black thread around the strip of paper. The sheet was brittle and yellowed. It had been folded several times, and the writing was cramped but readable. At the top were 4 names. Warren Hale, Martin Crothamus, Vel Edwin Shaw. Beneath each name were dates and amounts. Hale 25,000, Crow 40,000, Vale 15,000, Sure, 10,000. Additional entries followed. Clerk, office, 2,500 property room, 3,000 witness, 5,000 rail chest, 600. At the bottom, written in a different hand, were the words, Claimants to suppress Lane papers and seizure health and conviction. Kramer read it twice. This could be forged. Certainly, Wolfe said. It could have been made yesterday. It could. Then don't look so pleased. I am not pleased. I am interested. I held the paper beneath the desk lamp. The ink is old. Appearances are not analysis, Kramer said. Neither is scowling, but you rely on it. Wolfe extended a hand. I carried the strip to him. He did not touch it. He studied the handwriting, spacing, and payment dates. Who was Robert Lane, he asked. Kramer answered. Hawthorne's business partner. They owned a freight company together. Lane was found shot in his office. Hawthorne's gun was in the wastebasket. A clerk testified that Hawthorne threatened Lane that afternoon. Was money missing? Company bonds worth nearly 200,000. Recovered? No. And the chest? Kramer looked at the railway receipt. I never heard of it. Wolfe turned his attention to the photograph. Mr. Crow controlled rail freight. Mr. Vale was then a state assemblyman. Mr. Shaw was a police captain. Judge Hale presided over the trial. And Belmont prosecuted, I said. But his name is not on the list, Wolfe replied. Elias said his grandfather heard Belmont at the meeting. Presence is not payment. Kramer frowned. You think Belmont was honest? I think the absence of his name requires explanation. The telephone rang, I answered. A man identified himself as Deputy Marshal Aaron Kemp. I have a search warrant for the premises, he said. That is fast. I'll be there in 15 minutes. What are you searching for? Property belonging to the estate of Judge Warren Hale. The chair and any documents removed from it. I looked at Wolfe. Who signed the warrant? Judge Roland Pierce. That name meant something to Kramer. His head came up. I asked, former clerk to Warren Hale. There was a pause. That has no bearing. It has several bearings and a polished axle. Kemp hung up. I put down the receiver. We have 15 minutes, Kramer said. Pierce was Hale's clerk during the Hawthorne trial. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Convenient. He is now a state judge. His warrant is valid. Validity and integrity are not twins. I looked at the papers on the desk. Do we hide them? Said. No. Wolfe said. Yes. Kramer turned. You obstruct a search, and I'll arrest you myself. Wolfe regarded him. You have not seen the warrant. You do not know its scope. You do not know whether the men arriving are honest. Yet you propose to hand them evidence naming a former police commissioner and a sitting judge's mentor. It is still police evidence. No, it is material found inside my property. The chair may be stolen. Wolfe's lips pushed forward. The chair was purchased lawfully from an estate dealer 22 years ago. Until a court proves otherwise, it is mine. The contents are under my protection. Kramer stepped toward the desk. Don't be foolish. Wolfe's eyes became cold. Archie. I gathered the photograph, receipt and list. Kramer blocked me. Where are you taking them? To improve their health. Goodwin, Wolfe said. Inspector, if you wish to arrest Mr. Goodwin, do so. Then explain why you allowed a warrant signed by Judge Hale's former clerk to seize evidence implicating Hale's associates. Kramer stared at Wolfe. The front doorbell rang. 11 minutes, not 15. I slipped the papers inside the folder, containing Wolfe's household accounts, and handed it to Fritz, who had entered from the dining room. Kitchen, I said. Private shelf. Fritz nodded and disappeared. Kramer swore under his breath. You are both impossible. That has saved time before, I said. The bell rang again. I went to the front door. Deputy Marshal Kemp stood on the stoop with 3 uniformed officers and Clara Voss. Kemp was tall, red-faced, and carrying the warrant in one hand. Voss carried the same leather portfolio as the night before. You are prompt, I said. Stand aside. Show me the paper. He held it up. The warrant authorized a search for 1 custom oak and leather chair, formerly owned by the estate of Warren Hale, including all papers, photographs, keys, or other articles concealed within or removed from said property. It was broad enough to cover the chair, the key, and anything someone imagined had once touched either. I examined the signature, Roland Pierce. Clerk to Judge Hale 31 years earlier. I removed the chain and admitted them. Kemp entered first. Voss followed with the confidence of a woman returning to property she had already measured. In the office, Wolfe sat in the red leather chair. Kramer stood beside my desk. The large chair remained on the canvas with its arm panel open. Voss saw it. Her composure cracked for less than a second. "You opened the compartment," Wolfe said. "You knew there was one." "I knew Samuel Trent had altered the chair." "What was inside?" "That is why we are here." Kemp handed the warrant to Kramer. "Inspector." Kramer, read it. "You came quickly." "The estate filed an emergency petition." "At what time?" 7 this morning. Before the court opened. Judge Pierce reviewed it privately. Kramer looked at Clara Voss. "Who contacted him?" "I did," Wolfe said. "Naturally." Kemp approached the chair. "I am taking possession." "No," Wolfe said. Kemp turned. "The warrant authorizes seizure. It authorizes search for property claimed by the Hale estate. It does not establish ownership. It authorizes me to remove the chair pending here." "Read the final paragraph." Kemp did. His expression altered. "The warrant permitted documentation and temporary custody of concealed articles, but required the chair itself to remain at its current location unless structural removal became necessary." Judge Pierce had given the Hale estate nearly everything it wanted, but not the chair. Voss had not expected Wolfe to notice. Kemp said, "We will search it, you may." "Where are the articles removed from the compartment?" Wolfe looked at him. "What articles?" Voss said. "Mr. Wolfe, you claimed ignorance of the contents last night. I am asking now." "No, you are exposing knowledge." Kemp looked from her to Wolfe. "Were items removed?" I answered. "A photograph, a receipt, and a strip of paper." "Where are they?" "Safe." Kramer spoke. "Marshal, before those items leave this house, I want them photographed and listed in my presence." Voss said, "They are estate property. They may be evidence in a criminal conspiracy." Her face hardened. "Based on what?" "Based on names and payments connected to the Hawthorne case." Silence. Kemp looked at her. "You told the court this was a property dispute." "It is." "You knew the contents involved a criminal case." "I knew there might be old legal records." Wolfe's voice was soft. "You knew enough to seek a warrant from the former clerk of the judge named in those records." Voss closed the portfolio. "That accusation is improper." "It is exact." Kemp asked again, "Where are the items?" Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin will produce them after Inspector Kramer arranges independent photography." Kramer looked at Wolfe. For once, they agreed without enjoying it. He telephoned headquarters and requested a police photographer and an evidence examiner not connected with the old Hawthorne case. While we waited, Kemp and his officers searched the chair. They opened the visible compartment, removed the brass brace, examined the seat, probed beneath the leather, and tapped every section of the frame. They found nothing else. That interested Wolfe more than it pleased Voss. The narrow groove suggested a second hiding place, but the search did not reveal it. Samuel Trent had built it to survive men with tools. At 11:20, the photographer arrived. Fritz returned the folder. The 3 items were photographed, numbered, and placed beneath clear protective sheets. Kemp read the names. Voss watched him. Kramer watched her. Wolfe watched everyone. When Kemp reached Edwin Shaw, he frowned. "Former Commissioner Shaw," Kramer said. "Yes." "Is he alive, 82, and living in Connecticut?" Voss said, "The paper is an obvious forgery." "Then why did your client send men to seize the chair before anyone knew it existed?" I asked. She turned toward me. "We learned Elias Trent intended to make a fraudulent claim." "Who drugged him?" "I know nothing about that." "Who is Leonard Shaw?" "A private investigator." "No." Kramer wrote that down. Kemp finished the inventory. "The documents will remain sealed until Judge Pierce determines custody." Wolfe said. "No." Kemp stared. Kramer intervened. "They remain here under police guard until authenticity is examined. If you remove them now, every name on that list will have a reason to challenge the chain of custody." Kemp disliked it, but he could not deny it. A temporary seal was placed on the folder. Kramer signed across it. Kemp signed. I signed. Clara Voss refused. Before leaving, she stood beside Wolfe's chair. "You cannot prevent the estate from recovering this." Wolfe looked at her from the red chair. "The estate does not want the chair." Her eyes narrowed. "What does it want? What you failed to find?" For the first time she had no reply. She left with Kemp and the officers. Kramer remained. He looked at the opened armrest. What did they fail to find? The second compartment, I said. You found one? Not yet. Kramer glared. You let them search without telling me, Wolfe said. They were searching for an opening Samuel Trent designed to deceive Warren Hale. Their failure was useful. Kramer picked up his hat. I'm putting a man outside. Put two, Wolfe said. One may be honest. Kramer went. I closed the front door and returned to the office. Wolfe stared at his chair. The visible compartment stood open and empty. The maker's mark remained exposed. The brass key lay beside the sealed evidence folder. You knew they would get a warrant, I said. I expected an attempt. You also expected Pierce. No, his appearance is gratifying. You have an unusual idea of pleasure. It links the past to the present. I examined the groove behind the brace again. Where is the second compartment? Not beneath the armrest. Elias said his grandfather placed the copy deeper inside the frame. Then the visible papers may not be the copy. I looked at him. What are they? Bait. For Hale? Originally. Perhaps for us now. I studied the photograph, railway receipt, and payment list through the clear covers. If those are bait, what is worth hiding more carefully? Wolfe's eyes moved to the narrow groove. The proof that gives the names meaning. Outside, Kramer's patrolman took his position on the stoop. Inside, the chair remained under guard, partly dismantled, and more secretive than before. We had opened its first panel and found 4 powerful names. Someone had answered with a warrant in less than an hour. That meant the hidden evidence was not dead history. It was still dangerous enough to make old men frightened, lawyers reckless, and judges remember whom they had once served. Chapter 4. The secret of Samuel Trent. Elias Trent came downstairs at 3:20 that afternoon, wearing one of my shirts, Fritz's oldest dressing gown, and the expression of a man who had survived poison only to discover that Nero Wolfe expected testimony before supper. Dr. Vollmer had permitted 10 minutes out of bed. Wolfe intended to use 15. Elias entered the office slowly, supported by Fritz. He stopped when he saw the chair standing on canvas with the left arm partly opened and the brass brace removed. You found the panel? We found one panel, Wolfe said. Elias looked at him sharply. Wolfe remained in the red leather chair, which had not become more suitable through repetition. His knees were crowded, his elbows had nowhere honorable to rest, and his irritation had settled into a deep personal grievance against everyone connected with Judge Warren Hale. I placed a straight-backed chair near my desk. Elias sat. Fritz arranged the dressing gown around him, announced that soup would be ready whenever Wolfe stopped behaving like a district attorney, and left. Inspector Kramer had assigned 2 men to the brownstone. One stood at the front entrance, the other watched the rear alley. Neither had been told what was hidden in the chair, which made them more useful than many policemen who knew too much. Wolfe studied Elias. Your grandfather copied a payment ledger. Yes. Where is the copy? In the chair. Mr. Goodwin found a payment list, but no ledger. Elias looked toward the open compartment. That was not the place. So, there is a second compartment. Yes. How is it opened? I don't know. Wolfe's lips tightened. You have repeatedly traveled great distances to deliver incomplete information. My grandfather never showed me the second panel. He described it only once, near the end. Describe what he said. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. He said the first compartment belonged to Judge Hale. The second belonged to him. That is poetry, not carpentry. He meant Hale knew about one hiding place, but not the other. We had reached that conclusion. Elias opened his eyes. He also said the copy would remain safe as long as the chair remained whole. I asked, meaning we should not cut it apart? He made me promise. Wolfe said, promises given to frightened old men are frequently hostile to the reason. He believed dismantling the frame would destroy the evidence. That interested Wolfe. How? I don't know. Wolfe inhaled slowly through his nose. I said, we have 10 minutes. Let us spend 8 of them on what you do know. Elias nodded. My grandfather was hired to repair the chair at Warren Hale's estate in 1938, 3 years after he built it. Built it for Judge Alton Vane, I said. Yes. Vane suffered a spinal injury after a carriage accident. He needed a wide chair with extra support under the left arm and seat. Wolfe glanced at the brass brace. Why did Hale possess it? Vane died unexpectedly. Hale bought several items from his estate, including the chair. Expectedly, how? A fall from an upstairs balcony. Kramer had telephoned earlier with that fact. Judge Alton Vane had died after falling from his country house. The death had been ruled accidental. The investigating police captain had been Edwin Shaw, I said. Convenient for Hale. Elias looked at me. My grandfather never believed it was an accident. Did he have evidence? No, only fear. Wolfe made a sound of disapproval. Continue. Hale's estate was called Briar House. My grandfather was asked to repair a split in the chair frame before a private gathering. He arrived in the afternoon and worked in the library, the same library where he later heard the meeting. The chair had been damaged. The left support had loosened. Hale wanted it repaired before dinner. Why such urgency? My grandfather thought the chair was to be used by one of the guests. Wolfe looked offended by the suggestion that other men had occupied. Who summoned him? Hale's clerk, Roland Pierce. The name hung in the office. Judge Roland Pierce had signed the search warrant that morning, I said. Hale's former clerk was present 31 years ago and is still protecting. Chair Elias nodded weakly. Pierce was young then. He handled the estate papers, messages and private accounts. Was he at the gathering? My grandfather saw him carrying files into the library before the guests arrived. Wolfe said, Did Samuel Trent know the guests? Not all of them. He recognized Warren Hale and Police Captain Edwin Shaw. Martin Crowe was famous enough to know from newspapers. Thomas Vale was beginning his political career. And Calvin Belmont? He arrived later. Yet his name was absent from the payment list. Yes. Why? My grandfather believed Belmont was not one of the men making payments. He was there to receive instructions. Kramer had said Belmont prosecuted Peter Hawthorne. That placed the prosecutor beneath the four names rather than among them. Wolfe said, Tell us what Samuel heard. Elias rested his hands on his knees. His fingers trembled. The repair took longer than expected. One of the inner rails had cracked. Before he finished, Pierce told him the guests had arrived and ordered him to leave by the servants' corridor. But he did not. No. His tools were still spread around the chair. He was afraid Hale would accuse him of damaging it, so he gathered them quickly. Then he heard voices approaching. Where did he hide? Behind a folding screen in the library alcove. I looked at the room plan Elias had drawn upstairs. The alcove stood behind the chair, separated from the main library by a decorative screen and heavy curtains. Could he see them? Could they see him? No. Then what occurred? Hale entered first with Crowe, Vale, and Shaw. Pierce brought a leather ledger and placed it on the table. They spoke about 3 matters. Elias paused to catch his breath. Wolfe waited. The chair stood open under the lamp, its dark wood exposed like an old wound. The first matter was court rulings, Elias continued. Crowe wanted injunctions against smaller steel companies competing for city contracts. Hale agreed to assign the cases to judges who could be influenced. By money, I asked. Yes. The ledger contained payments to court clerks, judges, and lawyers who would arrange delays or favorable rulings. Did Samuel hear names? Several, but he remembered only fragments. The full names were in the ledger. The second matter, police contracts. Shaw promised that companies chosen by Crowe would receive orders for patrol wagons, uniforms, building supplies, and evidence storage. Kramer would enjoy that. A police captain selling contracts for equipment used by the department was the kind of betrayal that made him personally rude. The third matter, Wolfe asked. Railway land. Elias's face tightened. Thomas Vale had advance information about whether state intended to authorize a new freight line. Crowe's agents buying farmland through false companies before the route became public. Hale would dismiss challenges to the purchasers. Shaw would remove police records of threats made against owners who refused to sell. And Robert Lane? I asked. Lane discovered the arrangement. Robert Lane had been Peter Hawthorne's murdered partner. Elias nodded. Lane's freight company handled land deeds and rail deliveries for Crowe. He found false invoices and copied correspondence. He intended to go to the governor. Then he was killed. Yes, and Hawthorne was frightened. My grandfather heard Hale say Hawthorne was useful because he had argued publicly with Lane. What exactly was said? Elias looked at Wolfe. Hale said, The gun, the clerk, and Belmont will finish it. The sentence was simple enough to carry 30 years of dirt. The gun belonged to Hawthorne, I said. The clerk testified that Hawthorne threatened Lane. Belmont prosecuted. Yes. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. Did the men admit killing Lane? Not directly. Crow said Lane had been handled. Shaw replied that the property room would produce whatever Belmont required. That implies physical evidence was planted, I said. Yes. The payment list mentions property room 3,000, Wolfe said. Elias nodded. My grandfather watched Pierce open the leather ledger. Hale dictated amounts. Crow approved them. Vale objected to one payment being too large. Shaw said the police witness would not hold unless he received more. Which witness? The clerk who testified against Hawthorne. Kramer had named no clerk when telling us about the old trial. We would need the file. What role did Judge Vane have? I asked. Before his death, Vane had discovered one of the false land purchasers. He warned Hale that he intended to expose it, and then fell from a balcony. Yes. Wolfe spoke quietly. Your grandfather heard enough to understand that Judge Vane's death, Robert Lane's murder, and Peter Hawthorne's conviction were connected. Yes. Why not go to the police? One of the men in the room was the police. Another authority. Hale was a judge. Vale was becoming powerful. Crow controlled newspapers and rail companies. My grandfather was a cabinet maker with no witness and no proof. He had seen the ledger. He could not take it, so he copied it. Elias nodded. The meeting ended near midnight. The men went to dinner. Pierce left the ledger in the library because Hale intended to add more names later. Careless. They believed the house was secure. And Samuel? He remained behind the screen until the room was empty. Then he came out. I pictured the old cabinet maker in a dark library, hearing the dining room doors close, while 4 powerful men carried on, as if no one outside their circle existed. He copied the whole ledger, not every page, only the entries connected to Lane, Hawthorne, the railway land, and the court payments. He used thin drafting paper from his tool case. How long did it take? Nearly an hour. That is a long time to remain undiscovered. He had worked in wealthy houses for years. Servants avoid rooms where important men have told them not to enter. Wolfe, slightly, that was sound observation. What did Samuel do with the copy? He asked. He could not leave the house carrying folded papers. Pierce was checking servants and deliveries at the rear entrance. So he hid them in the chair. Yes. The first compartment? No. Hale already knew about it. That confirmed the visible panel had been built earlier, probably for Judge Vane. My grandfather opened the left arm and cut a second channel inside the frame. He rolled the copied ledger tightly, placed it inside a hollow support, and sealed the opening with a fitted wooden pin. The narrow groove, I said. Yes. The groove guides a thin metal release. What release? He never told me. Wolfe's eyes moved over the exposed frame. You said dismantling the chair might destroy the evidence. My grandfather attached the rolled paper to a fine wire inside the support. If the frame is split or the wrong panel forced, the wire pulls the paper into a lower cavity, I said. A trap, a safeguard. The lower cavity contains glue and oil. The paper would be ruined. Wolfe stared at the chair. Samuel Trent had not merely hidden evidence. He had designed it to commit suicide rather than be seized incorrectly. That explains why the search found nothing, I said. They probed the frame but did not know how to release it. And why Samuel never opened it again, Wolfe said. Elias nodded. He was afraid he would forget the sequence, yet he expected you to recover it. He made notes. Where? In his workshop. Do you have them? No. The workshop was searched after his death. By whom? I don't know. Drawers were opened, tools moved, papers burned in the stove, I said. Leonard Shaw, possibly. He had visited my grandfather twice. Wolfe's brows rose. When? During the last month of his life. What did he want? The chair. Did he claim to represent the Hale estate? No. He claimed to be writing a history of Samuel's furniture. That was imaginative. My grandfather sent him away. Then 3 days before Samuel died, he gave you the key. Yes. Why did he wait so long? Elias looked toward the chair. He had spent years trying to find it. Wolfe said, explain. The meeting. Samuel finished the repair. Hale paid him and told him never to return. A year later, Samuel learned the chair had been moved from Briar House. Sold? Quietly. No public auction, no estate record. Hale transferred it through an antiques dealer using another name. Why? My grandfather believed Hale discovered that someone had opened the ledger. Did Hale suspect Samuel? Perhaps. Samuel was questioned by 2 men, but he denied hearing anything. Soon afterward, the chair vanished, and the copied ledger remained inside. Yes, for 30 years, Samuel searched dealer records, estate lists, auction catalogs, and repair accounts. He found references but never the final owner. Until you found Wolfe. Elias nodded. After Samuel died, I followed his notes. Bramwell Antiques had sold the chair to a private buyer 22 years ago. Harold Quill kept the original invoice. It named Nero Wolfe, I said. Who else knew you visited Quill? Quill's assistant, Leonard Shaw, arrived while I was there. So, Shaw learned the location, yes. I left through the rear entrance, but he followed me. And the drug? Elias touched his throat. Quill gave me coffee while he searched the records. Did Shaw enter before you drank it? He spoke privately with Quill. Wolfe said. Then Mr. Quill requires attention. I wrote the name in capital letters. Elias's strength was fading. His face had gone grey. Wolfe noticed. One final question. Why did Samuel believe the evidence still mattered after the 4 principal men were dead or old? Because the payments did not end with them. What? The ledger included sons, law partners, companies and political funds. My grandfather said the first 4 men built a system that others inherited. I said, Clara Voss, Leonard Shaw, Judge Pierce. Possibly. The Hale heirs? Yes, former Commissioner Edwin Shaw is still alive, Wolfe said. Elias looked at him. My grandfather feared him most. Why? Because Hale kept records. Crow used money. Vale used influence. Edwin Shaw used men. Fritz entered before Wolfe could ask more. He took one look at Elias and announced the questioning finished. Wolfe objected. Fritz ignored him. That was one of the privileges of running the household honestly. We helped Elias upstairs. When I returned, Wolfe was still staring at his chair. The secret is not merely the old Hawthorne conviction, I said. No. It is a ledger showing how bribery spread through courts, police contracts, and railway purchases. Yes, and the copy is somewhere inside that frame. Likely. You do not sound pleased. I am sitting in this abomination. He shifted in the red leather chair and scowled. I went to the exposed left arm and examined the wood again. The narrow groove disappeared beneath the rear joint. A small round plug was hidden under the old finish, almost invisible unless the light struck sideways. There is the wooden pin, I said. Do not touch it. I wasn't going to. You were. I was considering it. Consider from a distance. The telephone rang. I answered. A man's voice said, This is Harold Quill. The antiques collector sounded frightened. I understand Elias Trent came to you. He did. I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe immediately. About the chair? A breath. About what Samuel Trent hid in it. I looked at Wolfe. Before I could answer, there was a sharp sound at the other end, like a door striking a wall. Quill said, They are here. Then the line went dead. I held the receiver for a moment. Wolfe said, Report. I did. He glanced toward the chair, then toward the front windows where Kramer's policeman stood outside. Archie, go. To Quill, at once. I reached for my coat and gun. Behind me, Wolfe remained trapped in the red chair while Samuel Trent's masterpiece stood open under the lamp. 30 years earlier, a frightened cabinet maker had hidden a copied ledger inside its frame because he trusted wood more than judges, police captains, senators, or industrialists. He had spent the rest of his life searching for the chair. Now that we had found his secret, everyone else was searching too. Chapter 5. The missing page. Harold Quill was alive when I reached his apartment, but his collection had suffered. He occupied the 4th floor of a narrow building on East 61st Street, where the hall smelled of furniture wax and old money. The door stood open. Inside, 2 chairs were overturned, a glass cabinet had been smashed, and several boxes of antique invoices had been emptied across the floor. Quill sat against the wall, holding a handkerchief to his forehead. He was 60, thin, and decorated with enough grey hair to suggest wisdom without proving it. Who hit you? I asked. I didn't see him. You called Wolfe and said they were there. I heard the outer door. Then someone entered behind me. One man. I think so. You think so because I heard only one voice. What did it say? Quill lowered the handkerchief. A red swelling showed above his right eye. He asked for the Bramwell invoice. The one showing Wolfe bought the chair? Yes. Did you give it to him? He already knew where it was. Then why ask? To learn whether I had made copies. Had you? Quill looked embarrassed. One. Where is it? Gone. I surveyed the room. What else? A folder Samuel Trent left with my father many years ago. That was worth bending closer. What folder? My father owned Bramwell Antiques. Samuel visited him repeatedly, trying to learn who had purchased the chair. He finally left a sealed envelope and asked that it be given to the owner if the chair was ever located. Did your father deliver it to Wolfe? No, he forgot. That is a valuable family habit. I found it only last month while arranging the old records. Was it sealed? Yes. Did you open it? Quill hesitated. Of course. What was inside? A railway receipt and a note referring to Samuel's workbench at the North Hudson Freight Depot. I stopped. The railway receipt we found in the chair. I don't know what you found. I described it. Quill nodded. The same shipment number. Where is Samuel's note? Taken. Did Elias see it? Yes. I showed it to him when he came looking for the purchase invoice. Who else was present? My assistant, Miss Boyd. And Leonard Shaw. He arrived a few minutes later. Did he see the note? I put it away. That was not the question. Quill looked at the scattered files. He may have seen the depot name. I telephoned the police from his kitchen, gave Kramer enough facts to keep him occupied, and left before Quill began remembering more slowly. When I returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was still in the red leather chair. That fact alone had begun to influence the investigation. His discomfort had sharpened him until he could have sliced bread by looking at it. The payment strip lay beneath glass on his desk. Kramer's examiner had returned the documents after photographing them, though a uniformed man remained outside to protect the house from law-abiding citizens. I reported Quill's account. Wolfe did not immediately answer. He was studying the payment strip through a magnifying lens. What? I asked. This is not a complete document. We knew it was a list. We knew what it contained. We did not examine what it lacked. He pointed to the lower edge. I leaned closer. The paper ended beneath the line concerning the Hawthorne conviction. The left and right edges were yellow and slightly frayed. The bottom edge was clean. Too clean. It was cut, I said. Yes. Recently. Compare the color. The surface of the paper was dark with age. Along the bottom cut, the inner fibers were pale. A few short threads projected from one corner, still sharp, I said. Someone trimmed it after opening the chair. Or shortly before Mr. Trent arrived. Elias? Possibly. Clara Voss? Possibly. Leonard Shaw? Wolfe frowned. You have adopted Kramer's method of naming every visible person. It saves an invitation later. He moved the magnifying lens. The payment entries continue in sequence. Hale, Crow, Vale, Shaw. Then payments to the clerk, property room, witness, and railway shipment. The final line is a conclusion, not an accounting entry, meaning another section followed. Likely. The strip may have been cut from a longer copy. What would the missing part contain? The recipients who inherited the arrangement, perhaps. Mr. Trent said the corruption extended through sons, partners, companies, and political funds. I looked at the pale edge. So someone reached the compartment before Elias, or Elias removed the lower page and concealed that fact. He nearly died bringing us the key. That does not certify every statement he makes. The front door opened, and Fritz entered with a tray of broth for Elias. He stopped when Wolfe spoke. Bring Mr. Trent down. He is resting. He may rest after answering. Fritz gave him a look and carried the tray upstairs. 5 minutes later, he returned with Elias, who was moving more steadily, but still looked as if a strong opinion might knock him over. Elias sat near my desk. Wolfe pointed to the payment strip. Was that paper complete when your grandfather described it? I never saw it. Did he say how many pages he copied? Several. This is a single narrow strip. He may have divided them. Why? To fit the frame. Did you open the compartment before coming here? No. Did anyone? Not that I know. The lower edge was cut recently. Elias stared at it. I didn't cut it. Who knew the chair had been found? Harold Quill. Quill's assistant. Anyone else? Wolfe's voice sharpened. Mr. Trent, cousin. I picked up my pencil. Name? Relationship? Our fathers were brothers. Occupation? Elias hesitated again. Private secretary to Senator Thomas Vale. That improved the afternoon immediately. Wolfe's eyes became half-closed. You told the private secretary of a man named on the payment list that you had located the chair. He is family. That is genealogy, not judgment. I needed help. What help? Richard had access to old Vale papers. I thought he might know why my grandfather feared the senator. When did you tell him? 3 weeks ago. Before Samuel died? Yes. Did you mention the hidden ledger? I said Samuel had copied records and concealed them in a chair. Did you name the depot? Elias's face tightened. Yes, I said. Quill's note referred to Samuel's workbench at the North Hudson Freight Depot. I told Richard because Samuel had once rented space there. Richard offered to search it. When? 2 weeks ago. Did he report finding anything? He said the depot had been cleared years earlier. Did you believe him? He is my cousin. Wolfe made a low sound. What precisely did your grandfather say about the depot? Elias rubbed his forehead. He kept duplicate tools there while working on railway contracts. He said if the chair was ever lost, the workbench would tell him how to recover what he had hidden. A diagram, possibly. A second key. I don't know. I said, you have used that answer enough to own it. He looked at me with tired anger. My grandfather spoke in fragments. He was dying. Wolfe said, and you selected which fragments to reveal. Elias lowered his eyes. I was afraid Richard might be involved. Yet you informed him. I wanted to see what he would do. That was a dangerous experiment. I know. Wolfe rang for beer. Archie, go to the depot. Now. Yes. Richard may already have cleared it, then discover what he missed. The North Hudson Freight Depot had once stood beside the river above 59th Street. The railway line had been abandoned, the sheds were used for storage, and the main office had become a kingdom ruled by a caretaker named Mullins, who considered questions a private attack. I showed him the railway receipt. He examined the old number and scratched his chin. This shipment was routed through here before going north. Samuel Trent kept a workbench on the property. Lots of men kept benches. This one made chairs worth searching 30 years later. Mullins took me through a long brick shed containing broken desks, rusted lamps, theatre scenery, and enough discarded furniture to furnish a government. At the rear stood a row of work stalls. Most had been stripped. One retained an oak bench fixed to the wall. The name S. Trent had been burned into the front rail. Dust covered the top, except for a clean rectangular patch near the right corner. Someone had recently placed a hand or tool there. Mullins said a man came yesterday. Description: tall, dark coat, good shoes. Age: about 40. Name, said he, was Richard Trent. I looked at him. You remember that clearly? He gave me $20. Generosity improves memory. He said he was collecting family property. What did he take? Nothing that I saw. How long was he here? Half an hour. Alone? Yes, I examined the bench. The drawers had been emptied years ago. The rear board showed scratches around one screw. I removed it and found a shallow cavity between the bench and the brick wall. Inside lay a long envelope. It matched the color and age of the payment strip. I opened it carefully, empty. The inner surface carried a faint outline where folded papers had rested for years. One end had fresh creases. The gum on the flap had been disturbed recently. Mullins leaned over my shoulder. Nothing there. Nothing is often the most expensive item. I telephoned Saul from the caretaker's office and asked him to bring a fingerprint kit and his quiet manner. He arrived in 35 minutes. The envelope held several old smudges and 2 fresh prints clear enough to photograph. The bench cavity held another on the loose screw. Saul studied them. You have a comparison? Not yet. Then you have fingers without a hand. Richard Trent has both. We searched the rest of the bench. Behind the left support, Saul found a thin metal rod with a hooked end. It was exactly narrow enough to fit the groove inside Wolfe's chair. A release tool. Wrapped around its handle was a scrap of paper bearing 3 penciled words: press, turn, draw. That was Samuel's opening sequence. The empty envelope had probably contained the missing pages, or the full copied ledger. Richard had reached it first. But he had left the tool. either because he did not recognize its purpose or because he had been interrupted. I returned to the brownstone with Saul, the envelope, and the metal rod. Richard Trent was waiting in the office. He stood near the bookshelves, tall and neatly dressed, with dark hair brushed straight back and a face that resembled Elias's only around the eyes. Senator Vale's private secretary looked as if he had been trained to make bad news sound procedural. Kramer sat beside him. Elias was no longer in the office. Wolfe said, "Mr. Trent came voluntarily." Richard smiled slightly. "My cousin telephoned me." I looked at Wolfe. "He did, from upstairs," Wolfe said. "Against instructions." Family loyalty was proving active in both directions. I placed the envelope and metal rod on my desk. Richard's eyes touched them and moved away. "You recognize these?" I asked. "No, Mullins at the depot recognizes you. I visited the property yesterday." "Yes, you told Elias it had been cleared 2 weeks ago." Richard folded his hands. "I went back after he mentioned Samuel's note without telling him. I did not wish to encourage his obsession." "Did you find this envelope?" "No." "Did you open the bench?" "No," Saul said. "Fresh prints will answer that." Richard looked at him. Wolfe spoke. "Why did you come here?" "To persuade Elias to abandon this attack on Senator Vale." "An attack? He is ill, frightened, and influenced by stories told by an old man near death. Senator Vale is 80 years old. He has served the state honorably." Wolfe's gaze rested on the payment strip. "His name appears beside $15,000. A forged list." "You knew of the list?" Richard paused. "Elias described it. He did not see it before today." That silence was better than a confession, though not as useful in court. Kramer leaned forward. "Where is the missing page?" Richard's expression remained smooth. "I don't know what you mean," Wolfe said. "The strip found in the chair was cut recently. The workbench envelope was opened recently. You visited the depot yesterday. These events are not independent. They could be, Fee." Richard turned to Wolfe. "You are treating family confusion as criminal evidence." "No, I am treating concealment as intention." The telephone rang answered. It was the fingerprint examiner. Kramer had called after Saul sent the photographs. He had compared the fresh prints with Richard Trent's government employment file. "Two matched," I told the room. Richard's face changed at last. Kramer stood. "Now we try again. What did you take from the envelope?" Richard looked toward the door. Saul was standing there. "I took one sheet." "The missing page?" "Yes." "Where is it?" "I gave it to Senator Vale." Elias appeared in the office doorway behind Fritz. "You lied to me." Richard turned. "I was protecting you. You were protecting him. I was protecting the family." Elias laughed without humor. "His family, perhaps," Wolfe said. "What was written on the sheet?" Richard sat slowly. "Names, later payments, judges, contractors, campaign committees. Living persons?" "Yes." "Judge Roland Pierce." Richard looked at Wolfe. "Yes." "Clara Voss?" "Yes." "Leonard Shaw?" "No." "Your own name?" "No." "Senator Vale's?" Again. Several later payments were authorized through his office. Kramer asked, "Did Vale order you to retrieve it?" "Yes." "When?" "After Elias told me about the depot and the chair. He ordered me to locate it." "Did he arrange for Elias to be drugged?" "No." "Did he send Clara Voss?" "I don't know." Wolfe looked at the metal release tool. "The missing page is no longer the only concealed evidence." Richard frowned. Wolfe continued. "Samuel Trent left the method for opening the second compartment. The true ledger copy may still be inside the chair." Richard's composure vanished. That reaction told Wolfe enough. "You knew," he said. Richard said nothing. "You removed one page from the depot because it described the release mechanism or because it named the current beneficiaries. You believed the remaining evidence was still in the chair." Richard looked at Elias. "Do not open it." Elias stared. "Why?" "Because Vale said the frame contains more than papers." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "What?" Richard swallowed. "A device meant to destroy the contents if the wrong release is used." "We know that." "No. Not only the contents." The office became still. Richard looked at Wolfe's chair. "Senator Vale said Warren Hale had a second safeguard installed after Samuel's repair." "What kind?" Richard's voice dropped. "A small charge inside the left frame." I looked at the metal rod on my desk. The chair stood 10 feet away, partly open and waiting. For 30 years, Samuel Trent's ledger had been protected by secrecy, family fear, and corrupt power. Now we learned it might also be protected by an explosive. Wolfe stared at the chair he had occupied daily for 22 years. Then he looked at Richard Trent. "Archie," he said softly, "remove everyone from the office." For once, no one argued. Chapter 6. The visitor who returned at night. Richard Trent returned to the brownstone at 17 minutes past midnight by using the rear cellar window and a tool designed for honest locks. That combination told me he had stopped trying to protect the family reputation. I heard him because the old window frame complained when it was raised. Fritz had gone to bed, Wolfe was upstairs, and I was in the office examining the diagrams Samuel Trent had left on the scrap from the freight depot. The house was quiet enough for the scrape of metal from the basement to sound like a confession. I turned off the desk lamp, took my gun from the drawer, and went into the hall. The cellar door stood open. A narrow beam moved below. I descended without switching on the stair light. At the bottom, the beam vanished. A shoe touched concrete near the wine shelves, followed by the soft rustle of cloth. "Stay where you are," I said. Richard ran. He did not run toward the window. He went through the storage room, up the service stairs, and into the rear hall. I followed close enough to hear his breath and far enough not to trip over him if he changed direction. He reached the office first. The chair stood where we had left it, surrounded by canvas and 2 lamps. After Richard's warning about a charge hidden inside the frame, Kramer had sent a bomb technician. The man had inspected the chair with mirrors, listening equipment, and the cautious hands of someone who disliked surprises. He found no explosive, no wire, and no chemical residue. That did not prove the chair was safe. It proved only that Warren Hale had not made the danger easy to detect. Richard dropped beside the lower theft rail and reached inside his coat. I switched on the office lights. He froze. His right hand held a short steel pry bar. His left held a folded carpenter's saw. "You came prepared to improve the furniture," I said. He looked toward the door. I stood in it with the gun aimed below his shoulders. "Put them down." He placed the tools on the canvas. "Goodwin, listen. I listened this afternoon. You gave us a bomb, a senator, and several lies. It was a full program. I had to come back. You were never invited the first time. I needed what is inside the lower frame. The ledger? A page. The page you gave Senator Vale?" He shook his head. "Another page." That was enough to keep me from calling Kramer for 10 seconds. "Stand up." Richard rose slowly, hands where I can admire them. He obeyed. I searched him. He carried no gun, but I found a small flashlight, a screwdriver, 2 envelopes, and a key to the cellar window latch. That last item deserved attention. "How did you get this?" "Elias." "Elias gave you a key to Wolfe's cellar?" "No, I copied it when he stayed here." Elias had been upstairs for 3 days and had not left the house. Richard had visited him that afternoon before Wolfe ordered him out. Family affection had evidently included an impression made in wax or soap. I pointed to the yellow chair. "Sit." He sat. I telephoned Wolfe's room. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Archie, Richard Trent has returned. Admit him tomorrow." He entered through the cellar. A pause. "Where is he?" "In the office. Do not let him touch the chair." He brought a saw. Another pause, colder than the first. "I am coming down." Wolfe entered the office 12 minutes later, wearing yellow pajamas, slippers, and a dark dressing gown. He looked at Richard, the tools on the canvas, and the chair. Then he lowered himself into the red leather chair. For Wolfe, descending 3 floors after midnight was evidence of either murder or intolerable furniture abuse. Richard had managed both possibilities. Wolfe said, "Explain." Richard leaned forward. "I came to remove a document hidden in the lower rail." "Which document?" "The missing page. You admitted giving it to Senator Vale." "I gave him 1 page. Not the one that matters most." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Then your previous confession was edited." "I was trying to keep Elias alive. By entering my house with a saw." "Crow's men are searching for the same page. Martin Crow is dead. His son is not." I took my notebook from the desk. "Name?" "Jonathan Crow. He controls the Crow Rail and construction companies." "Was he one of the men outside the house?" "No. Leonard Shaw works for him." That connected Shaw to the old industrial fortune rather than the Hale estate. Wolfe said, "Miss Voss, she represents the Hale family, but she has also handled Crow Company matters. Judge Pierce, Vale's ally. And Edwin Shaw." Richard looked at the floor. "Leonard is his nephew." That explained the surname. Kramer had not yet connected. Wolfe's voice hardened. You have distributed facts as though charging admission. Why should we believe the current performance? Because Jonathan Crow's men followed me tonight. Did they? I lost them near 9th Avenue. Or led them here. Richard's face tightened. I came through the rear because the front is watched. It is watched by police officers, not only police. I went to the front window and moved the curtain a fraction. Kramer's man stood across the street beneath a street lamp. Farther west, a dark automobile waited without lights. I could not see the driver. I let the curtain fall. There is a car, Richard said. Crow's. Wolfe regarded him. What page did you seek? Richard took a breath. The final entry in Samuel's copy. What did it contain? A statement written by Warren Hale. Why would Hale write a confession in a bribery ledger? He did not intend it as a confession. He recorded the decision concerning Peter Hawthorne. I said, the innocent man convicted of Robert Lane's murder. Yes. Richard's voice had lost its smoothness. He now sounded like a man repeating something he had spent years trying not to understand. The ledger showed that Lane discovered Crow's railway land purchases and threatened to expose them. Jonathan Crow's father, Martin, ordered Lane silenced. Edwin Shaw arranged the killing through a police informant. Name? Wolfe asked. George Rayner. I wrote it down. Hawthorne's gun was planted, Richard continued. The office clerk was paid to testify about the threat. Belmont was given altered police reports. Judge Hale suppressed a witness who saw Rayner leaving Lane's building. Who was the witness? A railway porter named Amos Reed. Was he paid? No. He was arrested on a false theft charge and held until the trial ended. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. Then Hale knowingly condemned an innocent man. Yes. What did the final page say? Richard recited it slowly. Hawthorne must carry the Lane matter. Vane's inquiry proves the danger of divided action. Pierce will remove Reed's statement. Shaw will control the weapon and clerk. Vale will secure Belmont's silence if needed. I stopped writing. Belmont's silence, I said. Was the prosecutor part of it? Not at first. He may not have known the evidence was false during the trial. Later he discovered enough to threaten Hale. What happened? His career advanced. That was an answer, without being one. Wolfe said. Why did Samuel conceal that page separately? Because it was the only entry written in Hale's hand. The other pages were accounting copies. The final page could identify Hale as the man who directed the conviction. Where is it? In the lower left rail. You know that how? Senator Vale told me. Wolfe's brows rose. When? Tonight. Why? He was frightened after learning you had the release tool. He said Samuel had divided the evidence. The payment pages were inside the arm. Hale's handwritten order was hidden lower in the chair, where the old judge believed no one would find it. Yet Hale knew of it, not at first. Samuel added the hiding place during the repair. Years later, Hale learned that a page was missing from his ledger and suspected Samuel. He had the chair examined but could not find the paper. And the supposed explosive? Richard looked ashamed. Vale invented it, I said. You told us Hale installed a charge. I needed you to stop opening the chair. Why? Until I could recover the page. Wolfe's lips pushed forward. You introduced the threat of an explosion into my home to delay me. Yes, that was unwise. Richard looked at the floor. Wolfe's anger did not rise, it condensed. Why does Senator Vale want the page now? Because Jonathan Crow wants it destroyed, while Vale wants it as protection. Against Crow? Against everyone. Vale believes the old alliance is breaking apart. Edwin Shaw is dying. Judge Pierce fears the Hawthorne conviction will be reopened. Clara Voss represents the Hale heirs, who want any proof of Warren Hale's crimes removed. Each group believes the chair contains the complete ledger. But none knows the exact hiding place, I said. Richard nodded. Vale knew only that Samuel used the lower frame. Crow's men searched Samuel's workshop and the depot. Voss tried to seize the entire chair. Leonard Shaw followed Elias. They are all looking, but none knows which rail contains the final page. Wolfe glanced at the chair. That ignorance explains why the chair has not simply been stolen. The frame could be damaged. The paper might be destroyed. And because each faction fears the others possess a copy, Wolfe said. Yes, I looked at Richard. Why come with a saw? The release tool from the depot opens the second compartment only if the inner catch has not shifted. Vale said the catch may have corroded. I plan to remove the lower rail carefully. With a carpenter's saw at midnight. I did not have time. Wolfe made a sound of disgust. Archie, inspect the lower frame. Do not touch it. I knelt beside the chair. The left arm compartment remained open. The narrow groove ran downward behind the brass brace and disappeared into the seat support. With the lamp angled low, I could see that it continued toward the rear leg. Near the bottom rail was a pin-sized hole filled with dark wax. I said, "There is another opening." Richard stood halfway. "That's it. Sit," I told him. He sat. Wolfe asked, "Can the metal rod reach it?" "Probably." "Do not insert it," Richard said. "Crow's men may enter before morning." "They will not," Wolfe replied. "You don't know them." "They do not know Mr. Goodwin." That was flattering enough to be suspicious. The telephone rang. I answered. The patrolman outside said a man had been seen in the rear alley examining the cellar windows. He had fled when challenged. Description: younger fellow, dark coat. Another man was waiting in the car. I looked at Richard. He nodded. Crow's men had not been entirely lost. I told the patrolman to watch the rear and telephoned Kramer. He answered, like a man who considered sleep an insult. Within 20 minutes, 2 more officers arrived. The dark automobile had gone. Wolfe sent Richard upstairs under guard, in the room farthest from Elias. The cousins had supplied enough family trust for one night. When the office was quiet again, I stood beside the chair. "You believe him?" "I believe he came for something." "The final page?" "Likely." "Do you believe Hale wrote the order condemning Hawthorne?" "The behavior of 5 parties supports the existence of damaging evidence." "Richard, Senator Vale, Jonathan Crow, Clara Voss and Leonard Shaw. Add Judge Pierce and the number improves." I looked at the tiny wax-filled opening. "We have the release tool and the sequence. Press, turn, draw." "Yes. Shall I try it?" "No." "Because of Samuel's destruction trap?" "Partly." "What is the other part?" Wolfe looked toward the windows. "Those searching for the chair do not know which part contains the proof. Once we remove it, their uncertainty ends. So we leave it hidden until they are assembled." I smiled. "The office gathering?" "Not yet. First we must learn whether the page can be authenticated and who killed Robert Lane. George Rayner, an alleged dead informant, is not evidence. Is he dead? Find out. He lied repeatedly, broken into my house, and threatened my chair with a saw. You make that sound worse than murder. At present, it is nearer." Wolfe rose from the red leather chair and looked at his own. For more than 20 years it had supported his weight, his meals, his refusals, and several $100,000 worth of thought. Now the lower frame might contain proof that an innocent man had died in prison because a judge, a police captain, a senator, and an industrialist had preferred profit to truth. Wolfe's expression became still. "The conspirators made one sensible mistake," he said. "Sensible mistakes are rare. They hid their final proof inside an object none of them understood. The chair. No, Samuel Trent's craftsmanship." He turned toward the elevator. "Archie, guard it. From Crow's men? From everyone." He looked once more at the tools Richard had dropped on the canvas, especially cabinet makers with saws. The elevator carried Wolfe upstairs. I remained in the office with the gun on my desk and the lamps aimed at the chair. Outside, men watched the brownstone. Upstairs, 2 cousins slept under separate locks. Inside the lower frame, if Richard had finally told the truth, waited the page that could clear Peter Hawthorne after 30 years and condemn every man who had built a career on his conviction. The hunters knew the proof was in the chair. What they did not know was where. For the moment, that ignorance was the strongest lock in the house. Chapter 7. The trap around the chair. At 8:55 the next evening, Wolfe's office contained 1 famous chair, 6 frightened people, 3 policemen, 2 private detectives, and enough old corruption to furnish a courthouse. The chair stood beneath the large office lamp on the square of canvas. Its left arm remained partly open, exposing Samuel Trent's maker's mark and the brass brace. The lower back panel looked untouched. That was important. Wolfe occupied the red leather chair beside his desk and hated every inch of it. His discomfort had become so concentrated that it supplied the room with heat. I stood near my desk with Saul Panzer by the bookshelves. Inspector Kramer waited in the front room with 2 officers, out of sight, but close enough to enter when summoned. The guests arrived separately. Elias Trent came first, pale but steady, wearing the grey suit Fritz had pressed for him. Richard followed 10 minutes later under Kramer's supervision. The cousins exchanged no greeting. Senator Thomas Vale arrived with a cane, a black coat, and the offended dignity of a man who had spent 40 years entering rooms only after everyone else had stood. Jonathan Crowe came next. He was Martin Crowe's son, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and calm enough to suggest that other men usually did his worrying. Former Police Commissioner Edwin Shaw entered leaning on Leonard Shaw's arm. Edwin was 82, thin, almost white-haired, and still carried authority in the angle of his head. Leonard, his nephew, took a place behind him without being invited. The last guest was Adrian Hale, grandson of Judge Warren Hale, and current trustee of the Hale estate. Clara Voss accompanied him, but remained in the front room after Wolfe refused her entry. Adrian Hale was 45, narrow-faced, and dressed with the expensive restraint of a man who wanted wealth, noticed only by experts. He looked at the chair before he looked at Wolfe. That was the first useful act of the evening. Wolfe surveyed the room. Mr. Hale, Mr. Crowe, Senator Vale, former Commissioner Shaw, Mr. Elias Trent, and Mr. Richard Trent. You have been invited because the complete ledger copied by Samuel Trent has been found. No one spoke. Jonathan Crowe crossed one leg over the other. Senator Vale gripped the head of his cane. Edwin Shaw's eyes moved toward the chair. Adrian Hale remained standing. "Where?" he asked. Wolfe looked at him. "You'll sit." Hale took the yellow chair. Wolfe continued. 31 years ago, Samuel Trent concealed evidence inside this chair after overhearing Warren Hale, Martin Crowe, Thomas Vale, and Edwin Shaw arrange payments affecting court rulings, police contracts, railway land purchases, and the prosecution of Peter Hawthorne. Vale lifted his chin. That accusation is absurd. It is documented by forged scraps produced by a frightened cabinet-maker's grandson. Elias said, "My grandfather told the truth." Vale turned toward him. "Your grandfather spent his final years pursuing delusions." Richard spoke quietly. He was not deluded. Vale looked at his secretary. Richard met the look without lowering his eyes. "That small rebellion cost the senator more than a shouted accusation would have," Jonathan Crowe said. "Mr. Wolfe, you claimed the complete ledger had been found. Produce it, in time." "Then this is theater." Wolfe's lips tightened. "Theater depends on illusion. I prefer fact." Edwin Shaw leaned forward. "You are in possession of stolen estate property and possible police evidence. You have no authority to withhold it. You retired from office 20 years ago. I still know the law. You knew how to bend it 31 years ago." Leonard Shaw stepped forward, careful. I moved half an inch away from my desk. Saul did not move at all, which was more impressive. Wolfe ignored Leonard. The first compartment contained a photograph, railway receipt, and part of a payment list. The lower edge of the list had been cut recently. A second page was removed from Samuel Trent's workbench at the North Hudson Freight Depot by Richard Trent. Vale struck the floor once with his cane. "My secretary acted without my knowledge." Richard looked at him. "You ordered me to retrieve it." Vale's face remained composed. "Mr. Trent is attempting to protect himself," Wolfe said. "That effort is common in this room." Adrian Hale looked toward the chair. "What exactly do you claim remains inside it?" "The final page of Warren Hale's record." His eyes shifted back to Wolfe. "What does it say?" "That Peter Hawthorne was deliberately condemned for Robert Lane's murder, so the land and contract scheme would remain protected." Edwin Shaw said, "Hawthorne was guilty." "No, you were not present. Neither were you at the murder, but you controlled the weapon, the property room record, and the paid witness." Shaw's thin face tightened. Wolfe continued. "Robert Lane discovered that Martin Crowe's companies were purchasing railway land through false names before the route became public. He intended to expose the conspiracy. He was killed by a police informant named George Rayner." Jonathan Crowe said, "My father is dead and cannot answer slander. His death does not improve his conduct. Rayner died 25 years ago." "No," I said. "He has been living under the name George Rayner in a private nursing home owned by a Crowe subsidiary. That was the result of my work the previous day. Saul had found the man. Kramer had placed him under guard that afternoon. Crow's calm expression did not disappear, but it became expensive to maintain. Wolfe said, "Mr. Rayner has admitted receiving money from Edwin Shaw to kill Robert Lane and plant Peter Hawthorne's pistol." Edwin Shaw's hand trembled once on the arm of his chair. Leonard said, "A dying criminal will say anything. Mr. Rayner is not dying. He is merely old and frightened." Senator Vale rose. "I will not remain for this insult." Wolfe's voice cut across the room. "You will sit." Vale stared at him. Wolfe did not raise his voice again. Richard said, "Sit down, Senator." Vale turned slowly toward him, then resumed his seat. Wolfe looked at the chair beneath the lamp. Samuel Trent copied the payment ledger during the secret gathering at Briar House. He divided the evidence. Some pages were placed behind the left arm. The decisive page, written in Warren Hale's own hand, was concealed in a second compartment. Adrian Hale said, "You cannot authenticate handwriting from a page hidden for 3 decades. Your family attorney has already supplied specimens from Warren Hale's private papers." Hale's eyes narrowed. Clara Voss had no authority to do that. She did not. Mr. Goodwin obtained them elsewhere. I smiled politely. Wolfe continued. "The final page is sealed behind the lower back panel." Every eye in the room went to the chair. The lower back panel was broad, curved and covered by dark leather fixed with old brass tacks. Beneath it lay no compartment that I had found. That was also important. Jonathan Crow studied it without moving. Senator Vale said, "You will not touch that chair until legal ownership is decided." Edwin Shaw said, "Inspector Kramer should seize it now." From the front room, Kramer could hear every word. Wolfe said, "Mr. Kramer will act when invited." Shaw's voice hardened. "You are obstructing a criminal investigation. You are attempting to direct one after retirement. The habit has survived longer than the authority." Leonard Shaw stepped closer to the canvas. I said, "Stay where you are." He looked at me. "I am examining stolen property. You are examining my patience." Jonathan Crow spoke calmly. "Suppose the page exists. What do you want?" Wolfe turned his eyes toward him. "Truth." Crow smiled faintly. "Truth is rarely the only item on an invoice. Your father thought similarly. Money, no. Protection for Elias Trent. He will receive it without your consent." Crow glanced at Elias. "Then why gather us?" "To observe which of you knows the chair." Silence followed. Wolfe placed one finger against the desk. Samuel Trent built 2 concealments. The first was known to Warren Hale. The second was designed later. Those who searched Samuel's workshop, attacked Harold Quill, pressured Elias, bribed Richard, and sought a warrant knew that evidence was inside the chair. They did not know where. Vale said, "You are guessing, until tonight." Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, open the lower back panel." I crossed to the chair carrying the short metal release rod from Samuel's workbench. I did not intend to open anything. The panel had been examined that afternoon. There was no keyhole, seam, or hidden catch. Wolfe had chosen it because it was the wrong place. I knelt behind the chair and placed the rod near the bottom edge. Jonathan Crow remained still. Vale said, "I forbid this." "No one asked you," I replied. Edwin Shaw gripped his chair arms. Leonard watched my hands. Richard looked confused. Elias looked frightened. Adrian Hale stood. "Stop." I paused. Hale took 1 step forward. "Everyone move away from the chair." No one did. His control slipped. "Move away from it," he repeated. "The page is not behind the back panel." The room became very quiet. Wolfe looked at him. "Where is it, Mr. Hale?" Hale froze. He realized the answer too late. Jonathan Crow slowly uncrossed his legs. Vale stared at Hale. Edwin Shaw closed his eyes. Wolfe's voice remained soft. "You alone objected not to the seizure, legality, accusation, or authenticity. You objected to the location." Hale said nothing. "You knew the lower back panel was false. I assumed Samuel would not use such an obvious place." "No, Mr. Crow also considers himself intelligent." Yet he remained silent. Senator Vale demanded legal authority. Mr. Shaw threatened arrest. Only you ordered everyone away from the chair. Hale's face had gone pale. "You are twisting a reasonable concern." "Then explain it." "The chair may contain a destructive device. Richard invented that tale at Senator Vale's instruction." Vale said sharply, I did nothing of the kind, Richard answered. You told me to say it, Wolfe continued, watching Hale. You did not fear an explosive. You feared that the wrong panel would be disturbed before you could reach the correct one. Hale looked toward the office door. Saul moved into his path. Wolfe said, Samuel Trent showed you the second compartment. I was not alive when he built it. Not then. Years later, Hale's mouth tightened. Elias stood. My grandfather met you. Hale looked at him. Elias continued. 3 months before he died. He said a member of the Hale family came to his workshop. Richard stared at his cousin. You never told me that. I did not know which Hale. Wolfe said. Samuel Trent summoned Adrian Hale because he hoped the judge's grandson would correct the old crime. He showed you the hidden release and told you where the final page lay. Hale's voice was low. That is false. Samuel made a note of the meeting. Miss Goodwin found it this afternoon in Harold Quill's recovered files. That part was true. Quill had remembered a separate envelope after the attack. Inside was Samuel's account of meeting Hale and demonstrating the lower support compartment. I took the note from my pocket. Hale did not ask to see it. Wolfe said, Samuel believed you were ashamed of your grandfather. Instead, you informed Clara Voss and began trying to obtain the chair through the estate. I was protecting my family from justice, from scandal created by dead men. Peter Hawthorne was also a dead man. He did not receive your concern. Hale's eyes moved toward the chair again. There, not the lower back. The lower left support where the seat frame joined the rear leg. The tiny wax-filled opening. Wolfe saw it. So did I. Archie, he said. I moved to the left side and placed the metal rod into the pin-sized hole. Hale lunged. Saul caught him before he reached the canvas. Hale fought once, hard and without dignity. Leonard Shaw moved forward, but Kramer entered from the front room with 2 officers. Stay put, Kramer said. Everyone stayed. Saul forced Hale into the yellow chair. Wolfe said, press, turn, draw. I pressed the rod inward, turned it clockwise, then drew it outward. A narrow section of the lower support slid free. Inside was a hollow channel. I reached in with tweezers and removed a tight roll of thin paper protected by waxed cloth. Elias made a sound that was almost a sob. Samuel's copy, he said. I placed it on Wolfe's desk. The paper was unrolled beneath the lamp. It contained several pages of payment entries, names, contract numbers, land purchases and political accounts. The final page was shorter. At its bottom was Warren Hale's signature. Above it appeared the sentence Richard had quoted, Hawthorne must carry the Lane matter. Below that were instructions naming Pierce Shaw, Vale and Belmont. Wolfe studied the page. So, he said. Adrian Hale stared at the document. Jonathan Crow's calm had vanished. Senator Vale looked 20 years older. Edwin Shaw's hands had begun to shake openly. Kramer read the final page over Wolfe's shoulder. This is enough for arrests. Not all of them, Wolfe said. Kramer frowned. Wolfe looked around the office. The ledger proves conspiracy, bribery, suppression of evidence, and the deliberate conviction of an innocent man. It does not yet prove who drugged Elias Trent, attacked Harold Quill, searched Samuel's workshop, or attempted to seize the chair through a corrupt warrant. Hale said nothing. Wolfe's gaze settled on him. Those matters require one more answer. What answer? Kramer asked. Which of these people feared the old crimes enough to commit new ones? Hale's face tightened. Wolfe leaned back in the red leather chair. The chair has yielded its proof. Now, the living will explain what they did to obtain it. Outside, traffic moved along West 35th Street, unaware that 30 years of protected corruption had been unrolled beneath an office lamp. The trap had not been the hidden panel. It had been the false one. 5 people had looked at it and guarded their faces. Adrian Hale had guarded the chair. By doing so, he had revealed that Samuel Trent had trusted him once, and that he had betrayed that trust. Chapter 8. The secret inside the frame. Adrian Hale's mistake was not ordering everyone away from the chair. His mistake was looking at the wrong part of it afterward. When the papers from the lower support were unrolled beneath the office lamp, every person in the room watched the handwriting, the payment amounts, or Inspector Kramer's face. Hale watched the underside of the seat. Nero Wolfe noticed. Naturally, he waited until everyone else had stopped noticing anything. The copied ledger lay across his desk in 4 thin sheets. Samuel Trent's cramped writing recorded payments to judges, police officials, contractors, political funds, and companies used to purchase railway land before the route became public. The last visible entry stated that Peter Hawthorne must carry responsibility for Robert Lane's murder. It was damaging. It was not complete. Wolfe studied the final sheet, then lifted his eyes. "Mr. Hale, you removed a page from Samuel Trent's hiding place years ago." Hale sat rigidly in the yellow chair with Saul Panzer behind him. "You have already accused me of enough. I have accused you of nothing beyond betrayal and stupidity. We are now approaching precision." Senator Thomas Vale gripped his cane in both hands. Jonathan Crowe sat without moving. Former Commissioner Edwin Shaw had lost the posture of authority and looked merely old. Leonard Shaw stood near the wall under the attention of one of Kramer's officers. Richard and Elias Trent occupied chairs near my desk. Kramer remained beside Wolfe, reading the copied entries. He looked up. "What page?" Wolfe tapped the lower edge of the fourth sheet. "This document was cut. The payment strip found behind the arm was also cut. The pages from the lower support contain accounting entries copied by Samuel Trent, but the sentence concerning Hawthorne ends without the operational instructions," Richard Trent quoted. Richard said, "They were on the page I found at the depot." "No," Wolfe replied. "You found a copy of part of them." Richard's face changed. Wolfe saw that too. "Archie, bring the envelope from Samuel Trent's workbench." I took it from my desk and placed it beside the ledger. The old envelope was empty, but the outline of its former contents remained on the inner paper. Wolfe said. The envelope held one folded sheet. Richard removed it shortly before Mr. Goodwin arrived. His fingerprints proved that. He admitted giving a page to Senator Vale. Vale struck the floor with his cane. "I received nothing." Richard looked at him. "You burned it in front of me." Vale's head turned sharply. That was not the answer of an innocent man. It was the reaction of a guilty man surprised by a detail. Richard continued. "You said no witness could be allowed to connect the Hawthorne case with the railway purchases. You ordered me to find Elias, Quill, and anyone Samuel had spoken to. I ordered no violence. You said accidents had protected the family before." The senator's face became grey. Wolfe said. Richard Trent finally understood that Senator Vale did not intend merely to destroy paper. He intended to destroy every person who could reproduce it. Richard lowered his eyes. "I had already told him too much. So you attempted to repair your conduct?" "Yes." "Explain." Richard looked toward Elias before speaking. The page in the depot envelope was Samuel's guide to the chair. It described the 2 hiding places and summarized the final order in Hale's ledger. I took it to Senator Vale. He burned the written guide, but I had memorized the release sequence. "Press, turn, draw," I said. "Yes, then why tell us there was an explosive?" "To stop you from opening the frame before I could move the real page." Kramer frowned. "Move it from where?" "The depot." Everyone looked at him. Richard swallowed. There was a second envelope beneath the workbench. I found it after I removed the first. It contained the original sheet from Warren Hale's ledger. Adrian Hale spoke for the first time in several minutes. "That is impossible." Wolfe regarded him. "No, it is inconvenient," Richard continued. Samuel had taken one original page from the ledger on the night of the meeting. He copied the other entries, but he kept Hale's handwritten order because it carried Hale's signature. Elias stared at his cousin. "You found the original?" "Yes." "What did you do with it?" "I hid it in the chair." Jonathan Crowe leaned forward. "When?" "The afternoon I visited Elias here." I remembered Richard's visit. He had gone upstairs to see his cousin and remained alone in the hall briefly while Fritz brought tea. He had also taken an impression of the cellar key. "You entered the office," I said, "for less than a minute, and put the page where?" Richard looked beneath the seat. "Behind the central brace." Adrian Hale closed his eyes. Wolfe said, "Precisely." Kramer turned on Richard. "You concealed evidence in this house, and then broke in to retrieve it. I thought Vale's men were coming. Then Crowe's men began following me. I no longer knew which group intended to seize the chair. So you arrived with a saw. I believed I had placed the page too deep to recover with the release rod." Wolfe's lips pushed forward. "You should not be allowed near furniture." Richard accepted that without protest. Kramer asked, If Richard hid the original only days ago, how does that prove Adrian Hale removed a page years earlier? Wolfe pointed to the copied ledger. Because Samuel Trent's account to Harold Quill states that he showed Adrian Hale the lower compartment 3 months before his death. Hale then opened it alone. Hale said, "Samuel showed me nothing. I took the cabinetmaker's note from my pocket." The note described Adrian Hale's visit to the workshop. Samuel wrote that he had shown the judge Gratzenson the chair diagram and explained that the decisive page had been hidden separately from the payment copies. Wolfe said, "Samuel hoped you would clear Peter Hawthorne's name. You pretended sympathy, found the chair's location through old state records, and opened the first compartment before Elias reached us. That is false. The freshly cut edge proves otherwise. You removed the continuation of the payment list because it named current companies and living beneficiaries, but you left the remaining pages. Why? Because you feared the destruction device Samuel described. There was no device. You did not know that." Hale stared at him. Wolfe continued. "Samuel told you that forcing the wrong joint would pull the papers into oil and glue. You therefore removed only what you could reach safely. You did not dismantle or steal the chair because its sudden destruction would attract attention, and because you still did not know where Samuel had hidden the original signed order." Jonathan Crowe said, "This is a theory." Wolfe turned toward him. "Your men searched Samuel's workshop, attacked Harold Quill, and followed Richard here. You believed Adrian Hale had failed to obtain the decisive paper." Crowe's voice stayed calm. "You have no proof they were my men." Saul spoke from behind Hale. "The 2 men who followed Richard were detained an hour ago. One carried a Crowe Construction identification card. The other had Leonard Shaw's telephone number." Leonard stepped away from the wall. Kramer's officer pushed him back. Crowe looked at Saul, then at Wolfe. Wolfe said, "Former Commissioner Shaw supplied the old police connections. Senator Vail supplied political protection. Mr. Crowe supplied men and money. Adrian Hale supplied access to the estate records and Judge Pierce." Edwin Shaw's voice was thin. "You cannot arrest men for the conduct of their fathers." "No," Kramer said, "but I can arrest them for conspiracy, assault, destruction of evidence, coercion, obstruction committed this week." Vail tried to stand. His cane slipped. Richard did not help him. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, the seat brace." I moved to the chair. For the first time all evening, Wolfe's expression showed something beyond concentration. He wanted his chair back, and the people responsible for delaying that reunion were exhausting the limits of civilization. The central brace beneath the seat was a broad oak rail reinforced with brass. Near its left end, behind a leather flap, I found a tiny opening filled with soft wax. Richard said, "Insert the rod. Press once, turn left, then pull the brace downward." Wolfe looked at him. "If the chair is damaged, you will regret surviving the evening." I inserted Samuel's metal tool, pressed, turned left. A click sounded inside the rail. I pulled gently. A narrow brass sleeve slid from beneath the brace. Inside it was a folded sheet protected by waxed linen. No oil, no glue, no explosive, only paper. I placed it on Wolfe's desk. Kramer put on gloves and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was larger and firmer than Samuel Trent's cramped copy. At the bottom was Warren Hale's signature. Wolfe read aloud, "Peter Hawthorne will bear the Lane charge. Pierce will remove the porter's statement. Shaw will control the weapon, the clerk, and the property record. Vail will secure the railway approvals after conviction. The disputed farms will pass to Crowe interests before public announcement." Below that was another sentence. "No review is to survive Vane's inquiry." Elias shut his eyes. Judge Alton Vane had discovered the land fraud. Soon afterward, he had fallen from a balcony. His chair had passed to Warren Hale, carrying a compartment Vane himself had ordered built. The paper continued, "Belmont is to receive the completed file only. He is not to see Reed's statement," Kramer said. "Belmont prosecuted with a false file." "Yes," Wolfe replied. "His name was absent from the payment list because he was not initially bribed. Hale and Shaw deceived him. Later, when he learned enough to become dangerous, Vail purchased his silence with advancement." Vail said, "Nonsense." Richard spoke without looking at him. "You arranged his appointment to the appellate court." Wolfe nodded. The ledger records that payment on the page, Adrian Hale, removed from the arm compartment. Hale's composure finally broke. I protected my family name. Elias looked at him. You drugged me. No, Leonard Shaw did, Wolfe said. At Harold Quill's apartment. Leonard's head came up. Wolfe continued. Mr. Quill's assistant saw you enter the kitchen before Elias drank the coffee. She remained silent because you paid her. She confessed this afternoon after Mr. Kramer offered her the alternative of arrest. They said, we found the drug in Shaw's room. Leonard moved toward the door. The officer caught him. Hale said, I never ordered anyone hurt. Leonard laughed bitterly. You ordered the chair recovered at any cost, not poison. It was a sedative, which nearly killed him, I said. Jonathan Crowe rose slowly. This gathering proves an old injustice. It does not prove I participated in recent violence. Saul removed a small notebook from his pocket. The men outside Samuel Trent's workshop kept your payment schedule. Your initials are beside the dates. Crowe looked at the notebook and sat again. Edwin Shaw had begun breathing heavily. Kramer signaled one of the officers, who moved nearer but did not release him from the consequences of age. Wolfe surveyed the room. The old conspiracy survived because its heirs inherited not merely money but method. Mr. Hale used the courts. Mr. Crowe used paid men. Senator Vale used office and influence. Former Commissioner Shaw used police loyalty. Each believed the chair could be controlled as their fathers had controlled evidence. He placed one finger beside Warren Hale's signed order. But Samuel Trent understood something they did not. A craftsman knows that pressure must be distributed. Concentrate too much weight on one joint, and the structure reveals its weakness. His gaze settled on Adrian Hale. You revealed the true hiding place by protecting it. Then on Richard. You preserved the original page only after helping Senator Vale destroy its guide. Then on Crowe, Vale, and Shaw. You all came because none trusted the others to destroy the proof. Kramer moved toward the telephone. The arrests were conducted without elegance. Adrian Hale was charged with conspiracy, obstruction, attempted theft of evidence, and directing the attack on Elias. Jonathan Crowe was held for conspiracy, assault, and the actions of the men detained outside. Senator Vale was taken for questioning regarding witness threats, destruction of evidence, and the continuing bribery network. Edwin Shaw was arrested for his role in concealing the Lane murder and for directing Leonard's recent acts. Leonard went with them. Judge Roland Pierce would be taken into custody before midnight. Richard remained. Kramer looked at him. You stole evidence, concealed it, lied repeatedly, and broke into this house. Richard nodded. I know. You are coming too. Elias stood. Will he be charged? That depends on the district attorney, the value of his cooperation, and how tired I am when I write the report. Richard turned to his cousin. I thought I could protect you without exposing everything. Elias looked at him for a long moment. That is what all of them said. Richard had no answer. Kramer took him out. When the office had emptied, Elias remained beside the chair. The original signed page lay in an evidence cover on Wolfe's desk. The copied ledger had been sealed for Kramer, and Peter Hawthorne's surviving family would finally receive the truth that had arrived 30 years late. Elias touched Samuel Trent's maker's mark beneath the left arm. My grandfather spent his life looking for this chair, Wolfe said. He should have kept better records. I looked at him. Elias almost smiled. Wolfe continued. The mark belongs to you. The chair? No. Wolfe's voice made that distinction final. I removed the small wooden plate bearing Samuel's stamped name. It had been designed to slide free without damaging the frame. I handed it to Elias. He held it carefully in both hands. Thank you. Thank Mr. Goodwin. He performed the labor. I usually do. Fritz entered and inspected the chair. Is it safe? Yes, I said. Is it whole? Mostly. Wolfe rose from the red leather chair. The room went quiet. He approached his own chair, examined the repaired arm, the closed lower support, the seat brace, and the upholstery I had replaced. Then he lowered himself into it with the solemn care of a man reclaiming both territory and natural law. The chair accepted him. Wolfe shifted once. The left arm is loose. It has survived 30 years of corruption and 1 week of policemen. It is loose. I'll fix it tomorrow. Tonight? Fritz said dinner was ready. Wolfe considered the loose arm, the dining room door, and the aroma of roast beef with mushroom sauce. Justice won by a narrow margin. He settled back. restored at last to the only seat in New York qualified to hold him. Samuel Trentsmark left the house with Elias. The chair remained. It had concealed bribery, murder, a wrongful conviction, and the names of men who believed power could make truth disappear. They had been wrong. Truth had merely been waiting inside the frame.